So, welcome to this week's episode of What One Thing, one business, one story, and one lesson to take away in action every week for small business owners looking to grow. I'm Hayley Baxter.
And I'm Phil Davenport. And today we're joined by Lisa Johnson, who built a multi-7-figure business, found herself on a super yacht in Greece, and realised she'd rather be at home with her friends having a Chinese buffet for £6.99.
Lisa talks openly about turning down a trip to Necker Island and why the more mindset stopped working for her, and how she also rebuilt a business that actually fits with the life she wants now.
If you've ever dreamed of hitting big goals and then achieved it and wondered why you don't end up feeling the way you'd expected, this episode is for you. Let's get into it.
Hi Lisa, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining
Hi.
us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to get straight into it. When you look back at your journey so far, what was happening in your business or your life that led to your one thing that you're going to talk about today?
So I think what was happening is I was doing really well. If I'm honest, that's what was happening. So I was on this kind of entrepreneurial train that the internet tells you that you should be on, that social media tells you should be on. So I'd done all the things, I'd gone from being in debt to making 6 figures, then 7 figures, then multi-7 figures. People were telling me, when are you going to get to 8 figures? I'd done the Sunday Times bestseller. I'd hit the #1 podcast, knocking off Stephen Bartlett, which seems to be the thing we all have to do. I'd been invited to Necker Island, and I was on that whole just keep doing more and more and more train. And that's where I was when it hit me that I didn't want to.
What was that moment? How did you come to the realisation that you'd got everything you wanted, but maybe not what you needed?
You got to remember that I come from poverty. So I always believed that making more money and more money would be the thing that solves all my problems, would be the thing that makes me feel happier and fulfilled. Because, not being able to afford rent is one thing, but I covered that in year 1 and then went, well, what else do I want? I want really nice holidays. Well, let's get that then. And then it's like, well, I want a multi-million-pound house. And I kept getting all of these things, material things, some extraordinary experiences, which I loved, but mainly it was material things. And status, if I'm honest, it was to show little bullied poor me of age 11 that actually you are not that person anymore. Look at all the things that you have. Look how well you've done. I was actually on a super yacht at the time that this hit me. I take my friends round Greece in a super yacht every year, like my friends from before I had any money, because they've stuck with me the whole time. And we were on this yacht and they were all talking about how they were going out and they were going to be getting a Chinese for one of their birthdays. Like we always do the birthdays together. And they were like, yeah, we're going to be having a Chinese in our local down the road, $6.99. And then they were like, oh, you can't come, Lisa. You're going to be playing tennis with Branson on Necker Island. So I was going in 2 weeks. And I sat there and I just thought, I want to go to the Chinese. I don't want to go to Necker Island. I want to go to the Chinese. Why am I going to Necker Island? And then I had to actually sit with that and go, why am I going? Because I didn't really like many of the people I was going with. It was very much, when you're multi-7 figures, you have to hang out with other multi-7 figure people to look good. And I didn't really like those types of people. And so I then went, I'm not going. And I didn't go, and I gave up the 70,000 it had cost me. And just said, yeah, I'm not coming. And I went to the Chinese and had a good night. But it got me on that roller coaster of thinking, what else am I doing that I don't really want to do?
So what did you do next with that, sitting with that thought process? And then how did you go about going through that process to make changes? Because that's like a really big thing to do when you've been so successful. And, it's hard to walk away from money when you're making lots of money, I would imagine.
Especially when you have a team. So, it's always in the back of my head that my team are my family and friends, and I pay their mortgages. Like, you have to think like that when you're a CEO. So you can't just go, right, well, I'm going to scrap everything. Let's burn it down and start again. You can't do that. And so for me, it was very much like, let's actually spend some time thinking about what you do want, what success looks like to you, rather than what people are telling you success should look like. And so that's what I did. I spent some time thinking, well, when was I happiest? And I was happiest like 4 years before, when I had a small team. I was probably making 1 to 2 million in business rather than like 4 or 5 plus. Like, okay, why did I like it? Because I was being creative. I wasn't just firefighting. I wasn't just thinking about the next way to make another million on top. I wasn't chasing a goal that wasn't mine. And what did I want my life to look like? So then I was like, what do I want my life to look like? Well, actually, I've got this multi-million-pound house. I feel no different in it than when I had a smaller house. In fact, I felt better in a smaller house. It felt cozier and it felt like a family house. This feels like an art gallery. And so I was like, okay, so that's one thing that you know. What else do you know? What does enough look like for you? Because when you're climbing a mountain, you think you got to the top of the mountain. And then when you get up there, there's another mountain behind it that's bigger. And so you constantly never feel like you've achieved anything or fulfilled. And so I started to think about the things that fulfilled me, like the charity work I do. I have a project called A Life Well Lived that I loved. And it's like, okay, well, how can I still do those things? How much money do I need to make to do all the things that I love doing? And most of it is just being around family and friends in amazing places. That's one of the things I love to do. And I didn't need anywhere near as much money as 8 figures or whatever I was going for at the time. I sat down with the family and said, what do we want life to look like? And we wrote it down. And then we worked backwards on, okay, what do we need to do to get there? And then it got even harder because that told us that actually we need to make less money. In 2025, we need to make less money than we've made before. How is that going to look? That's the problem, because everybody watches what I do and how, because I've always told them how much money I'm making and all of that kind of stuff. And so I knew all eyes would be on me, and it could look like I'm giving up or failure or any number of things, or like I was ungrateful for what I'd had. And so it was then doing some inner work on not really caring about what other people think about it.
Never had this to the extent that you must have done, Lisa. But as British people, and this is a real generalisation, I'm probably tarring people with the wrong brush here, I find you have to work out who the people are that celebrate success, because there's a lot of people that feel a lot of negativity towards success in whatever you do, from boxing, from fitness, from money, from life. And it sounds like you've managed to keep an incredible kind of friend group who've, celebrated. I mean, people who are enjoying us, and who doesn't enjoy a £7 Chinese? That's good value. Whilst, out on a super yacht. How have you found the journey with your friends and family, and how have you managed to keep those relationships positive when there becomes a disparity between you and the people around you?
It's actually been quite easy with the friends that I had before, because they've known me when they've had to help me out with a tenner so I could go out with them that night. They've known me when I had nothing. And so they always cheered me on. We did have a little blip in the first year when I started kind of being on the successful path, or what that looked like at the time. One of my friends had seen me on social media going to all these amazing places, and suddenly I didn't hear from her anymore. And I could have easily just let that friendship go, because if you don't hear from someone for ages, you're like, well, they're obviously like triggered or whatever. And I decided not to do that and to reach out and go, hey, why are we not getting together? What's happening here? And her husband, we got together with them, and they admitted that they just didn't think that I would want to be around them anymore, because I had all these, what they saw as fancy new friends going to fancy places. I wouldn't want to go down the local pub with them, but actually that's what I craved, is normalcy. And so, yeah, we had that blip, but we got over it pretty quickly. And since then, all of my friends have just stayed by my side, and I've not really had any issues with friends or family. I've had more issues with people in this industry, where I've made friends and then been used, or, like someone, I don't know why they're friends. Like, I trust everybody, or certainly used to. And it got to a point where people were being friends with me because either they wanted to be seen as being friends with me, or they needed my audience and they hoped that I would sell their stuff, all sorts of things. And as soon as I put boundaries in the way and said, well, I can't keep doing that, I wasn't their friend anymore. So I've had much more issues online than offline. The offline friends, they don't care about what I do. They'll take the piss out of me just the same as anybody else would. Like, they keep me grounded because they know that I'm just the same person. I haven't changed at all. And they say that as much as anyone else. Like, you're just the same person with a load of money. And I share that wealth anyway. It's not just for me, it's for all of us.
So now you've been on that journey, and 2025 has been, I assume, a transition. What's changed for you? What's changed now you've got this right?
So I am so much more peaceful and fulfilled, because I think that when you're unaligned and you're on somebody else's success journey, you might not know it, but you never quite feel aligned. And so as soon as I changed it, so my house is on the market, when we want this other house that we've seen, which is much smaller and much cozier. I still buy lovely things, luxury things, but I'm buying them with a real intention of, do I really like this thing? Or am I buying it because it makes me look good? Because I definitely think I was buying things because of the status of them. And I realized that no, actually, I do really like nice things. Like I love clothing and things like that, but it's at least making me think about it now rather than just, and I have said no to some things. Like people have said, oh, do you want to go to this like fancy place? I'm like, no, I actually don't really want to go there. I know that it would look good on camera, but I don't want to go. I just don't. So those kind of things. And when people invite me to things that have a lot of multi-7 or multi-8 figure people in them, I generally say no. They're not the spaces that I want to hang out in. I want to hang out with people that I like, not just people because of where they are in life. And so it's changed quite a lot from my side. Like we've gone down from 4 point something million revenue in 2024 to 2.8 this year. I intend to go down to around 1.5 to 2 next year, because it means I work less when I do that and I can spend more time with the kids. And I'm doing a lot more on the projects that I really want to do, like working with Bullies Out, and which is a charity I'm an ambassador of, but also starting my own charity, which is my 2026 project, because I'll have more time to do it because I'm not working so much. I'm not doing so many things. We've gone from 15 different things that we sell to 3, and it's just easier.
So you reached the phenomenal point that kind of, and I think the oldest saying that I've ever heard that took me about 35 years to understand is the journey is the goal. But you reach this phenomenal point where you've got super yachts, you go into places that you actually don't want to go to have photos with people you don't want to meet. You have this huge point where you say, do you know what, actually, I want the £6 all-you-can-eat buffet. How did you then align what you actually needed? What was the process that you went through? Because you're clearly very smart, Lisa. How can other people go through, especially, I think this pod might come out just in the new year, as people are trying to set those goals and work out what they want, how their life's going to pan out. How did you go through that process? What were the steps you took to work out what is enough and what do you want?
So the first thing I did was sit down and actually put together a spreadsheet, which sounds so basic, but it works. How much money do I need to pay for things that I need to pay for, like mortgages and things like that? How much money do I want for luxury? So like, how much money do I really need to just do the fun things in life? How much money do I want for giving and charitable work? And how much do I need to put aside for the future, for investing and that kind of thing? And then I worked out what that number was. And then I divided it by month, so I knew what I needed to bring in revenue. Then I looked at the business side of things. So if that's how much I needed, how much does the business need to make to be able to give me that and pay for my team and pay for the business expenses? Once I had that number, that gave me something to aim for. And there's a real sense of achievement when you actually give yourself something to aim for, that you know why you're going for it. I think a lot of people in this industry go, well, I want to make 7 figures. And they have no idea why. There's no purpose attached to that. It's just because it's something that people say, I need to make 6 figures, 7 figures. And when they come to me, people say to me, well, I want to make 7 figures. And I'll be like, why? Oh, no, because I want a lot of money. And it's like, work out what you actually need, but work out what you actually want, because that will give you a much better feeling. So the first thing I did was that. The second thing I did was look at the business and go, what do I enjoy doing in this business and what don't I enjoy? I had a mastermind where people were paying me $35,000 a year, and a lot of people paying me that. And I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I was like, there's something about this mastermind that I don't enjoy. And so I just stopped doing it. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I just stopped. So I think the next thing to do is write down everything you do right now in your business and cross out anything you don't actually enjoy doing. You can always work out how to then replace that income. So what I did is I stopped that and I said, what do I love doing in business? I actually love intimate sessions in my own house, like 10 people for a strategy day. So I put 2 of those on a month over the whole of, we had 100 people come through this house in 2025 in groups of 10. And that profit-wise made me the exact same amount as doing that mastermind. So you can always find a way to do something you love to replace something you don't love. And so that was like my next step, like working out what I wanted to do in the business. And the third was to actually work out what fulfills you. Like, it's never money or work. You think it is. I thought it was for a long time because I've been conditioned to think like that. But it's actually, what brings you joy? and then find ways to incorporate that into your life. Now, I'm not saying don't make any money. I love money. I think we need to make money to be able to have the life that we want. I still want an extraordinary life. It's knowing when enough is an achievement. Because when I looked back, I don't remember the day I got a Sunday Times bestseller. I made $1 million in an hour once, and I can barely remember it now. Like, you remember the stuff leading up to it. You remember the moments in between, because that's when it's fun, not necessarily when you reach the goal. And in fact, every time I reached a goal, what's the next one? Really quickly. And we don't want to live like that, because we'll be 90 going, why am I not fulfilled?
What would you say to somebody that doesn't know? Because I think that's a challenge for a lot of people throughout all walks of life, is that sometimes they just don't really know what they want. And that sounds really silly in one way, but in another way, I think it's really real that people don't know. They don't know how much money they want to earn. They don't know what they want to do with their time.
I think we start with that, because I think most people don't know what they want. And that's why they suddenly find themselves in jobs and in businesses that they don't actually like. And they're like, how did I get here? And it's because you don't know. If you don't know where you're steering a ship, you aren't going to get there. So I think it's actually really important to spend the time dreaming, to spend the time just really thinking about what would feel good for your life, what would make you excited for your life. And I think that's actually a really hard thing to do, because we're not conditioned to spend time still and thinking, daydreaming and being creative. We're conditioned to do action, action, action. So it's actually giving yourself space and time to kind of really think about it and go, well, what's given me joy in the past? And another way to look at it is when you look at other people, when you feel a kind of twinge of envy or jealousy, that means they're doing something or they have something that you want. That's a really good guide. At the beginning, I used to look at people who are rich and get that whole envy. Why them and not me? And it made me realize that that's because I want that. But I realized towards the last couple of years, I was looking at people that were like spending loads of time with their kids and getting a twinge of jealousy. I was looking at people that were really healthy and had time to go to the gym and getting a twinge of jealousy. And I was like, okay, that's telling me that's what I'm working towards. That's something I actually want.
I absolutely love it, because that's such an actionable fact, isn't it? I can't remember. There's a term about jealousy and kind of gratitude and all those kind of things and I think you've hit the nail on the head of looking at other people. I think the other piece that, and again, probably as Brits we're terrible at, is seeking help from people who've been on the journey and actually taking a moment and having that humbleness to be able to reach out and say, can I pay for your services? Can I get some coaching? Can I work towards happiness? Because if we're not flipping getting coaching towards that, then I really don't know what we're hoping to achieve in this world.
Yeah, I think you're so right. It's about, like, we're so good at spending money on things that are going to make us money, but we're not very good at spending money on things that will help us realize what we even want. And we need to be able to do that more. And to be honest with you, I was exactly the same as everyone else. So when I first started, someone said to me, your ambition is going to make you unhappy. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you're just going to keep going and going and going. Like, you think money is the answer, and it's not. And when you've got nothing, you can't listen to that. You're very much like, it's definitely going to help me. Like, you would say that. You've already had the money. And now I'm in that position where people are looking at me going, well, you would say that because you've had the money. But I wish I'd have listened, not to make no money, but to really work out what the goal is and stop at that point rather than keep going and going and going. But I think it's hard for people to understand that if they haven't been there.
I agree with that. And I also think there's something about permission that keeps coming to my mind. It's like giving yourself the permission that you don't have to be this successful, what society's defining as successful, I suppose. It's what it is to you. And there's definitely a permission thing in there, I think.
Yeah. For some of my clients, all they want is to be able to spend more time with their kids. They just want freedom. They want to be able to go on a couple of holidays a year. They want to not have to worry about, whether they can afford some nice clothes. It's those kind of things. And they get those things. Sometimes that only takes 5 to 10K months. And they get those things. And then they get them and then they carry on. And then they're stressed because they're like, well, we need to bring in 200 grand a month. Otherwise, we need that. And I'm like, do you remember when you only wanted 5K? And you said you would be so happy if you'd got that, but you've forgotten. People forget. And it's like, well, they're comparing themselves to other people. Well, that person's getting this, so I need to get that. And actually, the level of success and your self-esteem and your self-worth is not based at all on how much money you bring in. It's about so much more than that. But It's hard to see that sometimes, I think, in an industry that's this noisy.
I think that I completely agree with what you've told us there. I think there's a few pieces at play. I think one of them is the law that you make that huge jump at the start, and then once you've got to a point where you can afford a house, and it's the Joe Rogan thing, but you walk into a restaurant and you buy a steak. You don't think about how much is the steak. You don't think about, will I be able to have breakfast tomorrow? But you've got that level of wealth there. And then additional to that, you're actually adding very little, but you start to work really, really hard because you've not managed to realign. And I certainly had this with the fitness journey and probably with the business journey at the same time, that you get to a level where you can run half a marathon and you're still pushing and you start to get injuries and you're pushing so hard. And actually you have to stop and think, okay, well, why did I want to do this in the first place? The reason I started my business, the reason I went on this journey was to get more money, was to be happy, was to spend more time with my family. And it's that realignment and that sit down of goals.
Yeah.
So who is your ideal person to work with, Lisa? And how would they get in touch with you?
I have two different ideal clients. The first is someone that is where I was, not making enough money in their business to get the basics and the luxuries. So, people who are doing a one-to-one kind of job and they want a one-to-many job. So they come to me and we work out how they can scale a business without using more of their time. So they're the first people. The second people that I've started to help recently are people that have got to a quite decent place in their business and realized that actually they're not enjoying it. And so I'm now helping people to align that. Like maybe they've been a coach for years and they're like, actually, I'm not enjoying coaching, but they have all these transferable skills they can do something else with that they actually really love, and helping them work out how to do that, how to go from one thing to another.
And how do people get in touch with you, Lisa?
The easiest way is Instagram, because it's me that answers that, not my team. So I'm on @LisaJohnsonStrategist.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries. Thank you.
Wow. What an inspirational speaker Lisa was today. And what one thing that could maybe only come from somebody who's achieved and done as much as she has within the corporate or the commercial world, however we'd like to kind of phrase that. But she was a really inspirational speaker. What was your one big takeaway from that, Hayley?
I think it's really interesting because I think it is easy to sit and listen and think, as we alluded to in the conversation, that it's easy for Lisa to do that because she's kind of made the money, she's got the success, she's got those choices. Whereas there are lots of people out there that potentially won't feel like they do have, because they're still trying to accumulate that wealth and that profitability, and they're very much on the journey. But actually, I think it's something that everybody should think about when they're starting their business or when they're on their business journey, because it's really important that you do understand what you're trying to get to and what that good looks like for you. And I think it's really easy, exactly like Lisa said, to get caught up in the hype, and particularly if you're in, we've talked a lot about how peer groups are very supportive and they're a really good thing to have as a business owner. But with that, you can also get caught up with someone else's dream or someone else's journey, when actually, if all you want to do is, is achieve X, why are you trying to achieve Y? And just get swept along on that journey. And I don't think enough business owners really think about it when they start or when they're on the way, partly because sometimes they just don't know, partly because they're just trying to make a success of the business as they're doing it, and partly because it's actually a little bit scary, I think, to sit down and go, this is what I want. I don't think people are very good at doing that for lots of different reasons. So what was your big takeaway?
I think the first and probably the biggest takeaway from Lisa is just that she is absolutely unshackled from the amount of kind of head trash that we sit in. She isn't thinking kind of tens of thousands or thousands. She's immediately thinking big money, big ideas, big concepts. I loved the portion of, okay, let's have a look at what great looks like before we've got there, because it is so easy to want a nicer car, to want a nicer house, and then when you've got them and you're traveling in a bigger circle, to want a nicer car again and a nicer house again, and to get caught in that rat race of working more and more hours. And actually, where do we want to be? and how are we going to achieve that in 5 years, and how much of our goals are around finance. And I think certainly if you've been in a position where you aren't financially stable, a big portion of your goal is to become financially stable. But what does that look like for you? What does that mean for you? And how much do you need? I think it kind of doubled down on something that I always believe the journey is the goal. So if you want to lose 2 stone, then yeah, you could just chop off a leg. But the reason, and I know that's extreme, but the reason we don't is because we don't actually want to lose 2 stone. We want to be healthier. We want to be fitter. We want to look better in the mirror. That's the actual, and that's the journey, is getting that confidence. And I think it's the same in business. The journey is to be able to give back, to be able to give value, to be able to provide a better life for your friends and your family, and within that to provide a better life for yourself. And I think that was where Lisa was talking about, and probably how we all need to align our goals before we get there, so that we realise when we've kind of crossed the finish line, if you will do, and we need to have a review and a think about where we want to go with goals.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When we were talking to Lisa, it reminded me of, there's a software for accountancy proposals called Go Proposal, and it was owned by somebody called James Ashford, and he sold it to Sage, I don't know, a couple of years ago now. But he is quite an inspirational guy, and he set up lots of businesses that have failed. His journey is quite extraordinary. But when he set up this last one, he set it up with the intention of selling it, and he put a price tag on it at the beginning of him setting that up. And then as they were going through the journey, he was like, I want to get to, and I can't remember what the exact number was, but say it was, I want to get to 1,000 clients signed up to this monthly subscription, or 500 clients. I can't remember what it was. And somebody said to him, but you know what you want to sell that business for. How many clients do you need to actually achieve that number? And the number was something like 432. So the chat was like, well, if you only need 432 to get what you want, why are you trying to get 1,000? And that was going through my head when we were talking to Lisa. It's that concept, isn't it? But sometimes you just don't stop. You need somebody to point that out to you, because you don't realise that you don't need the 1,000, you just need the 432. And I think that was the big message for me. I would really encourage people to think about it. And it was ironic because I had a call with somebody afterwards, and we were having a very similar conversation about their journey and how much they needed to earn to live the life that they wanted to live. And when you actually go through that process, it's interesting what comes out of it.
Definitely.
Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you found one thing to help move your business forward.
And if you did, please do us a favour, share this episode with someone else who's on the same journey. We'll see you next time on What One Thing.